CD players.
Edition with Carol Lynn and Leon Harris. Weekdays on CNN.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Well, welcome our viewers from around the world. We now go to Brent Sadler with news on the bombing of the Serbian TV headquarters. Brent, what's new?
Thanks, Rosemary. I've just returned within the last hour from an extensive inspection with government officials here and other journalists of the aftermath of this overnight missile strike against the headquarters of Serbian television in the heart of the city, as you can see by this graphic. Now, the extent of damage is truly disturbing. There you see the main transmission mast, some antennas rendered useless, but the very heart of the transmission center, that's where tapes are fed, where editing is done, where studio broadcasts are transmitted from, that has now been reduced to a mountain of smoldering rubble as a result of this strike, which really targeted the back end of the studio complex, collapsing several floors. And we have seen while we were down there two bodies inside the rubble and another body inside the building while we were visiting, and the emergency services have not yet, at least they hadn't an hour ago, been able to get some of those people, some of those bodies away because of the way that they were trapped inside the tons of concrete. Now, officials are saying that the early estimates of the number of dead inside the building is in the region of about 9. They're not clear on the casualty figures for the simple reason, they say, that they just do not know how many people are trapped beneath the hundreds of tons of concrete and steel which have piled up as a result of the missile strike, and they are concerned that there will be many more dead found beneath the rubble once they're able to start removing it one piece at a time, or rather chunks at a time. Now, as far as injuries are concerned, we don't have any precise figures of the numbers who were taken to hospital, but a government official on the scene, Goran Matic, who's a member of the federal Yugoslav government, described the attack as a criminal act, and he said that those who'd committed this were, quote, murderers. He said that there were a number of casualties inside one of the city's main hospitals. He said some of them were suffering from severe burns and others with undisclosed serious injuries. It's still pretty early in terms of assessing what the casualty figures are, but certainly a significant number of deaths from what we were able to see on the scene there in terms of people who were trapped overnight. Some disturbing images we saw broadcast on Studio B, one of the television stations here in Belgrade, and again disturbing images in daylight hours of bodies and body parts stuck inside the ruins of the building. Now, at the time of the strike, about 100 studio personnel, it said, this cannot be independently confirmed, of course, but officials say some 100 studio personnel were on duty at the time of the attack. As usual, it was not the custom and practice here to evacuate the building after air raid sirens, and they continued their work, transmitting programs as they have been doing throughout this crisis, throughout the conflict, through the night. At the time of the strike, they were showing an interview with Yugoslav President Slobodan Milosevic, and that was cut off in the middle of that, and the screens both inside Serbia and internationally, because Serbian TV broadcasts outside Serbia as well as domestically, the screens went blank. Now, within the past hour or so, Serbian television has somehow been able to rejig its broadcast facilities, and despite the devastation of its headquarters here, they are now back on the air, both domestically and internationally, and able to continue showing the kind of destruction we saw there at Serbian television and other areas of damage to infrastructure and civilian life, which of course they have been concentrating on throughout NATO's air campaign. NATO had considered that Serbian television was the very nerve center of what NATO considered to be propaganda and was therefore a legitimate target, and felt that they were fully justified in conducting this attack. As far as the Serb side goes, they say that they have been trying to tell the world their side of the story, and that NATO is trying to deny them access to the international public opinion and trying to stop them being able to give their interpretation of the conflict. Rosemary.
Brent, what about the surrounding area around the Serbian TV headquarters? How much damage has that incurred?
Well, collateral damage was not what I would describe as extensive, but certainly there are a great number of windows shattered, obviously close to the studio complex. If I can just set the scene of the area, because it's difficult to tell when you're seeing nighttime pictures like these, just where this is situated. But Serbian television on the one side has St. Marco's Church at the back of it, which is just maybe 200 or 300 yards away. There is also at the back of this rubble a children's theatre, it's called, which was also destroyed, and that stands almost next to, or at least adjacent to the church. On one side, on another side of the studio complex, there are apartments. People live in residential apartments, that is, people living there. A main street along which there are many shops and cafes. And this is, you know, a social centre around here of life here in Belgrade. So this, in terms of its targeting, as far as NATO was concerned, may well have been regarded as a high risk in terms of collateral damage. Certainly there has been collateral damage, but what is significant is that the fact that there has been a high price paid in terms of human life here for NATO's attempt to block Serbian television, to put them off the air, because Serbian television is back on the air now. These pictures you're seeing have been broadcast from Belgrade a short time ago to the outside world. Serbian television has also been the centre, I might add, where the international news media, where we have been using those facilities now destroyed to broadcast news reports throughout the world. And of course, this now restricts, maybe for the short term at least, our ability to be able to report this story from the Serbian side. But as far as the Yugoslav authorities are concerned, as far as President Slobodan Milosevic is concerned, Serbian television has now been able to find a way very quickly to reroute their pictures, to reroute these scenes and get them out not only just to the Serbian audience, but to the wider global audience at large. And certainly they must have had some serious contingency plans already in place for this eventuality, given the speed with which they've been able to re-establish their transmissions.
All right, Brent Sadler with the latest on damage done to Serbian TV headquarters. Juanita.
Well, the latest NATO campaign follows a diplomatic push by Russia to bring an end to the conflict. Russian Special Envoy to Yugoslavia, Viktor Chernomyrdin, met with Yugoslav President Slobodan Milosevic on Thursday. He says Mr. Milosevic is ready to accept an international presence in Kosovo under the supervision of the United Nations. Official Yugoslav sources tell CNN the plan calls for a, quote, unarmed presence that would exclude NATO countries with the possible exception of Greece. CNN's Betsy Aaron has more now from Moscow on the Russian peace initiative. Betsy.
Well, Anita, there's a very little bit of news now coming out of Russia. Everyone was asking whether this so-called international presence would be armed or unarmed. And just about an hour ago on the news agency Interfax, there was a line that said that Yugoslavia had agreed, Slobodan Milosevic had agreed to a, quote, military presence under UN auspices. This was not even in the lead of the story, so we double-checked it, and they said, yes, Viktor Chernomyrdin had told Interfax, the Russian news agency, that Yugoslavia had agreed to a so-called military presence. Now, that's quite a detail to bury in the bottom of a story, but that's what Viktor Chernomyrdin is telling everyone in Russia now. We don't know whether we're talking about a heavily armed military presence or a lightly armed military presence, but this military presence would be under the auspices of the United Nations. Now, that's what Russia has been pushing for all along, that the UN be in charge, that NATO step back. Kofi Annan is scheduled to come to Russia sometime next week, perhaps on Wednesday, to meet with Boris Yeltsin and Viktor Chernomyrdin and probably the foreign minister and the prime minister to talk about this kind of an arrangement for the UN to finally step into this morass in Yugoslavia. So the first word out, finally, a few details that there may be some kind of a military presence acceptable to Slobodan Milosevic. Juanita?
Well, Betsy, so far a very cool response from the West to that peace proposal. What's the feeling in Moscow about that?
I think that really angers the Russians, that the West is so fast to dismiss these attempts at Russia to mediate this crisis. Very interesting things are going on here in Russia right now. Domestically, what you have on one side are the defense secretary and members of the military establishment saying, put us in, boys. Let us send weapons to Yugoslavia. We can help. We can make a difference here. What the civilians, Boris Yeltsin, Viktor Chernomyrdin, the foreign minister, the prime minister, are saying is, no, we do not want to get militarily involved in this. Then you put an umbrella over this whole situation of the IMF loans and of the very, very dire straits that Russia finds itself in economically. I'm sure it wasn't a coincidence that British Prime Minister Tony Blair made a speech yesterday in Chicago in which he said Britain might be prepared to loosen up the economic relationship between Britain and Russia and accept more Russian goods into Britain. What obviously Britain is saying is, if you are good, Russia, and you stay on this peaceful tack, we may reward you. We will certainly support the IMF loans. We will certainly push for the World Bank money to be freed up. So Russia is desperately in need of international support, but it also very, very proudly wants to help its Serb brothers to end this fighting in Yugoslavia. Juanita?
Betsy Aaron in Moscow with that report. Rosemary.
Hundreds of thousands of ethnic Albanians have fled Kosovo into neighbouring Albania and Macedonia. CNN has learned that more refugees at the camp in Stankovac, Macedonia, are set to be transferred to other countries. CNN's Bill Hemmer joins us now with an update from Stankovac. Bill.
Rosemary, workers here with the UNHCR indicate that several thousand more refugees may cross the border here into northern Macedonia later today. Again, they indicate there's no way to know that for sure. They only base that on a pattern that they have noticed over the past month. They say for the past 3 days, the refugee crossings here have been rather light, indicating, they say, a possible mass influx possibly today and later today. And again, they indicate it could be up to several thousand people. Yesterday, though, up at Blace, which is the border crossing here about 10 minutes to the north, bordering in the southern edge of the province of Kosovo, we noticed about 5 o'clock yesterday, several hundred people crossing, loading on the buses. We counted 6 buses crammed in there with 60 or 70 people coming to this main camp, Stankovac, which right now has about 27,500 people. It is at maximum capacity. The other indication we're getting from officials here working with this relief effort is that there's no true pattern to find out who was let across the border and who is not. They say it's very inconsistent, they say, according to Serb policy. Sometimes you need a simple identification, sometimes you need a proper passport, other times you don't need anything. And it's at that point when they reach the Blace, again 10 minutes up the road here, that Serbs, they say, make the decision for who can cross and who cannot. And for those who cannot cross, they say they're put back on the train and sent back into Kosovo, assuming that they go back to their towns there in Kosovo. Now, behind me here, it's just morning. It's been raining for the past several hours here. And again, this camp is at maximum capacity, 27,500. This is normally the time of day when a lot of refugees will go up around this corner here, around these tents here, and pick up water and bread and other supplies that are given out by the relief agencies who are working this particular camp. But again, it is important to point out that the UNHCR indicates to us that if several thousand more people do cross, it could reach a point here anyway of critical mass, only because it is, again, real close to capacity. Rosemary?
All right. Bill Hemmer reporting there from northern Macedonia. Juanita.
Leaders of NATO countries are converging in Washington to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the alliance. But NATO will be marking its milestone under less desirable circumstances than it might have wished. CNN's Charles Bierbaum reports.
NATO has to contemplate its immediate problem, a small, nasty war, rather than celebrate its success, half a century of avoiding a massive war.
It is no doubt the gravest crisis that Europe and NATO have faced for many years.
Yugoslavia is the first place NATO has fired in anger.
We want all the people of Kosovo restored to their homes, free of the hostile presence of Mr. Milosevic's forces, protected by an international security force, enjoying liberty and self-government.
The battle to protect Kosovo's ethnic Albanians from Milosevic's Serb forces has recast the NATO summit as a working session rather than a commemoration of the alliance forged here in 1949.
NATO was born after the defeat of fascism in Europe. NATO cannot permit a rebirth of fascism in Europe 50 years later.
NATO members do not all think alike. One possible Kosovo solution, partition, worries neighbors such as Greece.
We think that the change of borders in the Balkans will create a very difficult and very dangerous condition.
The Russians, who have observer status at NATO, are protesting NATO's bombing campaign against the Yugoslavs and boycotting the summit. Yet even as the NATO leaders gathered in Washington, Russia's premier sent word from Belgrade that Milosevic would accept a United Nations peace force in Kosovo.
If there is an offer for a genuine security force, that's the first time that Mr. Milosevic has ever done that, and that represents, I suppose, some step forward.
NATO itself has taken an uncertain step. Rather than being the defensive alliance of the Cold War, it has intervened in a sovereign state.
Events in Kosovo have shown clearly why we need a strong and adapted NATO with new members and new capabilities ready to take on new missions.
The big difference is that for nearly 50 years, NATO's mission, standing up to the Soviet Union, was certain. The Kosovo experience may subject new NATO missions to greater debate. Charles Bierbaum, CNN, Washington.
And we'll have more on the NATO airstrikes in Yugoslavia after the break. Stay with us.
#1-800-US-SEARCH, the #1 people locator service worldwide. Locate a long-lost friend or family member. Many of our customers only know the name of the person they'd like to find. Over the phone or online, find anyone, anytime. Our search center is always open 24 hours a day. Who do you want to find? Find anyone. Call 1-800-US-SEARCH.
Nobody covers the crisis in Yugoslavia like CNN. With continuous live coverage and the most distinguished team of correspondents providing the latest reports around the clock. And a wrap-up of all the day's dramatic events in a special report. Tomorrow, 10 Eastern on CNN.
And we return now to our top story, the continuing NATO strikes on Yugoslavia as the alliance marks its 50th anniversary. And joining me now is Dana Allen, an international security expert and Balkans specialist with the International Institute for Strategic Studies here in London. I want to ask you first, though, about the big development overnight, the bombing of the Serbian TV headquarters. Is a TV station staffed by civilians a legitimate target?
Well, I suppose it's a legitimate target in the sense that Serb television is certainly an arm of Serb propaganda. I'm not sure it's a wise target, however. As you say, I mean, these are civilians, and Serb television is apparently back on the air. So, if anything, it's a propaganda setback for NATO.
That's right. Well, NATO is saying that it's the nerve center of the Serb propaganda machine. But apart from the annoyance factor, I mean, why do they consider it such a threat?
Well, there is no question that when we talk about propaganda, we're talking about something really like the big lie. I mean, I'm sure that Serbs, based on the information they have, actually believe that the hundreds of thousands of Albanian refugees are leaving Kosovo only because of Serb bombing and not because of a campaign of ethnic cleansing. But again, I'm not sure this kind of attack is really going to do anything to change that impression.
Now, this, of course, has all happened on the eve of NATO's 50th anniversary summit. Now, when this summit was being planned, obviously nobody had any idea that NATO was going to be embroiled in the biggest European conflict since World War II. What does the Kosovo conflict say about NATO's changing role?
Well, it certainly suggests that NATO is no longer simply a defensive alliance. The problem is it's not clear what NATO has become. There's been a long debate leading up to this summit between the Americans, who have been pushing for a broader role, more out-of-area activities by NATO, defending common interests globally, and many European powers, particularly the French, who have been much more resistant about seeing NATO take on such roles. Of course, all these questions have been rendered somewhat irrelevant by the fact that NATO is involved in a war which is in Europe, but is certainly not, well, certainly not strictly a defensive war.
There is, of course, dissent among NATO member nations about NATO's involvement in this conflict. Do you think this summit will be a show of unity, as it's meant to be, or will we start to see the cracks showing?
I don't think you're going to see many signs of disunity at this summit. In fact, one of the most remarkable things, and I mean, I think that's one thing that NATO at its anniversary celebration or anniversary summit can be fairly satisfied about, the level of unity in favor of these airstrikes from almost all 19 members is, I think, the real story here. NATO has done pretty well so far in avoiding many divisions in what is, after all, a very difficult and a potentially divisive action.
Dana Allen, we have to leave it there. Thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you.
And still to come on World News, flowers and poems and prayers pile up as investigators search for clues in this week's shooting at a US high school.
Tired of playing the adjustable rate game?
Sorry, your mortgage payment went up again.
Then maybe now's the time to dump that adjustable mortgage and refinance into a low 30-year fixed rate from Dytek.
Just call 1-800-71-FIXED. If you have excellent credit, a fixed rate loan means that your mortgage payment will never go up. Apply right now, over the telephone. It's simple, it's easy, it's smart money from Dytek Funding.
Refinance now to a low 30-year fixed rate of just 6 3/4% with 0 points. Call 1-800-71-FIXED.
Weekdays.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Talk Back Live.
It's provocative.
You didn't answer her question. Give us the straight talk.
A place for great debate.
You know, we're having an intellectual discussion. We don't have to always agree.
A news program where your voice can finally be heard.
I think people are tired of all the rhetoric. They just want to see some action taken.
Now, join Bobby Batista, your live connection by computer, phone, or fax to top newsmakers in the world's first daily interactive town hall meeting. Talk Back Live. Weekdays, 3 Eastern on CNN.
Only CNN, the world's news leader, offers a full hour of hard news at 6:30. The Moneyline News Hour with Lou Dobbs. Thoughtful, insightful, and complete. Intelligent coverage of the day's events, plus all the financial news from around the world you've come to rely on. All the news from the best in the business. The Moneyline News Hour with Lou Dobbs, weeknights, 6:30 Eastern on CNN and CNN FM.
There are still more questions than answers in Littleton, Colorado, where 15 people were killed in a school shooting spree. Investigators there are still searching Columbine High School, looking for clues to what may have prompted the rampage. CNN's Brian Cabell tells us the police may have some new insight into the suspect's motives.
CNN has learned that either one or both of the suspects in Tuesday's attack on Columbine High School left a final note. According to authorities, the note read, "Don't blame anybody else for our actions. This is the way we want to go out." Some law enforcement officials here have questioned whether the two suspects could have planned the attack alone.
We certainly think that there's a very good chance now that we have more than two people involved.
Authorities have now recovered a rifle, 2 sawed-off shotguns, a semi-automatic pistol, and about 30 explosive devices. They also discovered what Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms officials call bombs. 2 20-pound propane tanks packed in duffel bags found in the cafeteria kitchen. About 14 months ago, the two suspects, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, were arrested for breaking into a car. CNN has obtained documents from the juvenile court counselor who supervised them. Of Harris, the counselor wrote, "Eric is a very bright young man who is likely to succeed in life. He is intelligent enough to achieve lofty goals as long as he stays on task and remains motivated." Of Klebold, the counselor wrote, "Dylan's a bright young man who has a great deal of potential. If he's able to tap his potential and become self-motivated, he should do well in life." No word on when the investigation here might conclude. Officials are still searching the school for more explosives.
All those backpacks are still in the school, all throughout the school. And there are briefcases and boxes, and they're using X-ray machines and everything else they can to X-ray literally thousands of backpacks, boxes, briefcases, anything that could house an explosive device.
Officials are also interviewing hundreds of students. They're looking at the suspect's email, phone messages, and a website reportedly created by Harris. As for Columbine High itself, it will remain closed for the rest of the school year. Officials say they're still searching for some place where the school's 1,800 students can finish out the school term. Brian Cabell, CNN, Littleton, Colorado.
And World News will continue after this break. Stay with us.
Politics.
And instead of voting their conscience, they got their finger in the wind.
International policy.
You know the way to undermine Castro? Let democracy in.
Abortion.
It is not up for people to take the law in their own hands and say so.
Crossfire. The program that takes on the tough issues.
You think we can roll up the sidewalk?
No, no.
Welcome to the 21st century.
Join Robert Novak and Bill Press on Crossfire. Weeknights at 7:30 Eastern, only on CNN.
Perfect partners plot the perfect crime in the new movie Entrapment, starring Sean Connery and Catherine Zeta-Jones. Now the trap is set. Imagine yourself entrapped in luxury. You could win a trip to London to enjoy all the trappings of royalty. Brought to you by Continental Airlines and CNN Sports Illustrated, the thinking fan's choice for sports news 24 hours a day. Look for details in USA Today or displays at participating Bloomingdale's.
I've got a proposition for you.
Entrapment in theaters April 30th.
And just to recap our top story, NATO airstrikes hit the Serbian state television headquarters on Friday. Yugoslav authorities say there are at least 9 dead and many injured, but it's too early to tell how many people may have been killed. These are live pictures being broadcast from Yugoslavia. After the missile hit the TV headquarters, transmission was stopped for several hours. The latest strikes come as NATO leaders are preparing to meet in Washington for the organisation's 50th anniversary celebration. They will be discussing